Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for today we're going to do something entirely different. We're going to take on PvP using different strength and faith builds. This is going to be really fun. I can't wait to get into this one. This is definitely something you're going to want to stick around for. This is pretty fun, honestly. Using some of these weapons in PvP can be a really good time. First things first, we're going to start with the Candlestand build, which I did yesterday. Now, the Cranial Vessel Candlestand can actually one-shot players in certain circumstances. It does massive fire damage. If you saw my video yesterday for PvE, it's not bad at all against larger targets. I threw a little bit of PvP in there, decided to continue with it in this video, but it does a ton of damage in PvP. If you can bait players, that initial explosion can do around 1,500 of their health. Yeah, after the poise nerfs, especially after 1.10, they're going to get knocked down from that initial explosion. It's going to do massive damage to them. You've seen it before, I think yesterday's video. You can actually one-shot players if they're close enough with this Ash of War, Surge of Faith. It's fantastic for that. It does really good damage when you bait players. And if you're not into PvP, don't worry. This is pure entertainment, and honestly, it's just supposed to be fun and a good time. I'm not going to do too much PvP, but I will start doing some more of it, adding it into it, because honestly, we've got a long wait for DLC. So let's get into a little bit of PvP, extra content, maybe Armor Core when it comes out too. Really excited for that one as well. And out of all the matches with the Candlestand, by the way, I ended up winning probably about 60% of them, so it wasn't bad at all. Let's get into equipment. We have the Cranial Vessel Candlestand, and then our talismans are Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. Tier doesn't really matter, that was for our PvE build. Obviously we hit 51 poise as well, which is important in PvP. Let's get into stats. Now for stats, we did this entire PvP setup as a strength and faith build with a little bit more of an investment in our faith stat, and that's the main thing we're going to be doing for this theme. We're going to do a couple different builds though, this isn't the only one. I'll timestamp everything as well, but mainly for this video we're going to be strength and faith. It's one of my favorite damage types, so I wanted to see how well it would do in a PvP type setting, and it turned out really well. There's a couple different really cool builds here. Next up is the Coated Sword, another weapon that's definitely good for PvP, especially if you can bait certain people into coming close to you, because it has a wider sweep than what it looks like. It looks like it's going to hit for less, but then it ends up having a really wide sweep, and you can end up doing a lot of damage with the Coated Sword as well. Particularly as a faith build, it is a solid option for PvP, and yes, it can be dodged through obviously, but the sweep is really good. It's a solid weapon. The Ash of War Unblockable Blade can also go through shields. I'll show the build and setup shortly after a few matches, but overall I was actually impressed with the Coated Sword. I wasn't surprised though, I know some people do use it for PvP, and again, after that poise nerf, that big change in 1.10, a lot of other weapons become even more viable now as you get more knockback, and poise matters much less in the current PvP meta than it used to. Yeah, a lot has changed since I played PvP. The last time I was really into PvP was when the Coliseum update came about, which was probably in December. For the Coated Sword build, by the way, we just swapped out. We used the Sacred Scorpion Charm, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Swords Talisman, and Dragon Crest. Dragon Crest has a lesser effect in PvP, but anyways, it's a good setup. But yeah, PvP, it's been a long time since I got into some matches, and I won about half of the ones when I jumped on. For stats, by the way, if you're using the Coated Sword, probably should go for 80 faith. You wouldn't need strength in this instance. You could probably just go for as high as faith as possible and get even more damage. Out of all these builds, if you're looking to start out in PvP, the first one I'd probably recommend is the Coated Sword, because the Candlestand build, you're going to have to bait people for that one, and some of the other goofy ones I use in here, like the bubble build that you're going to see, there ends up being a really long fight with the bubble build. It's a lot harder to use. You kind of have to spam the Ash and such. I ended up playing against the same player twice in a row, but apparently it wasn't the best at dodging the bubbles, and it ended up for an entertaining fight and a fun weapon. Yeah, you can have a really good time using the Envoy's horn. It's so stupid, but everything obviously can be spammed in PvP. One of the issues with PvP is spamming stuff in general. Now, for me, the bubble spam, though, it's still pretty slow for the most part, but yeah, it does chase them around. It is kind of a nice bonus to have that, and it's not a bad PvP weapon. It's not absolutely terrible. It's probably better in PvP than it is PvE, and at the very least, it's really fun to use. Now, after this fight, the next one is the one that ends up going on for a little while, and this was against a player which I think may or not have given up at the end. I'm not sure whether they did. I'm pretty sure they just gave up at the end because it ended up going on for a while, which I guess happens from time to time. But the bubbles are kind of ridiculous. They continue to follow the player. They can go at a reasonable speed. They're not super fast. It's not going to be like Glintstone Pebble, but it's interesting to use it in the same way that you would use sorceries in PvP, and to make use of a weapon that's really not used that much in PvE. By the way, if you're following to this point, definitely be sure to hit that subscribe button. I've been doing a ton of Elden Ring content lately. I'm going to continue to do Elden Ring content, and as I mentioned, maybe Armored Core 6 when it comes out. Looking forward to that too. Maybe we'll do some PvP content too, if people are into that, and we can jump in and keep the game going for a lot longer since we're waiting a little bit for DLC. Seems like to me, as I mentioned in one of my previous videos, it's probably going to be early to mid 2024. Now, for using stuff like the bubble build here, when we're using the Envoy's horn, and again, this match ends up going on for a long time, for me, I was just spamming the Ash. I ended up almost getting killed here. I probably should have gotten killed here. This player I actually ran across, I think, a total of 4 times. We ended up being 2-2. They beat me twice. I beat them twice. And yeah, the bubble ended up just being, I guess, too much, and they end up giving up towards the end of the fight. Also, let me know what you think in the comments section, by the way. I know my PvP skills aren't that great. Again, it's been about 7-8 months since I've done PvP in Elden Ring, but your thoughts on PvP, your experiences with it and whatnot, comment below. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think, too, of the 1.10 changes. I know that was a big deal. So patch 1.10, feel free to comment below and let me know how you feel about the patch and how it's affected your PvP gameplay in Elden Ring. And as we run around here, we end up having them give up. This is the part where they just, I guess, decided to give up because there was just too much bubble spam. And that's one of the issues with PvP, is the spam in general. I did deal with that with Glintstone Pebble. So many people that were using Glintstone Pebble or variants on the quick spells, and they just spam them over and over again, especially since now you take even more knockback after the poison nerf. Jumping back in, though, was not as bad as I thought. If you're looking for something to do and you're thinking, I'm on the fence about PvP, maybe it's time to give it a try again, especially Coliseum with the duels. You don't have to deal with people healing. You don't have to deal with certain things. It's not bad at all to jump back in and do the Coliseum. By the way, I ended up with the same player again here, and we're going to move on to Arduvus's Greatsword. Arduvus's Greatsword was not one of the better weapons at all for me. As far as this weapon goes, you have to land it obviously very close. Charging it up is not something you're going to be able to hit or get off very frequently because it has a long charge. It is boosted by the Godfrey icon. It can do massive damage, but you're better off with just the quick hit rather than charging it. Even so, not a great weapon in my opinion for PvP. I did just okay with it. I think I did about 6 or 7 matches. I only ended up winning, I think, 2 with the Greatsword. Another thing I could say is if I can do PvP and I can do decent at it, then pretty much anyone can. As you guys know, I'm average at games in general for the most part, so as far as my dodging skills and my reaction times, they're not always the best. I'm fully admitting of that. Not the perfect PvP player by any means, and I still was able to jump back in, have fun, and do some damage and get some wins. Now for Arduvus's Greatsword, and the same general setup, although I used the Ritual Swords Talisman for the Coated Sword, so it was close to that one, was the Shard of Alexander, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Godfrey icon, but it's really hard to get off when it's charged, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, and then for stats, this one leans more towards strength, so I might flip my stats. Overall though, we went with the Faith build for the most part. And I think we're going to be getting into our last build here for this video. And the last build for this video ended up being one that was really fun. And that was Lion's Claw with a Flame Art Greatsword. Guts Greatsword and Flame Art Lion's Claw. Apparently solid for PvP. Now I ended up facing a player who was also using Guts Greatsword. Probably not something that's that uncommon for PvP. I can't say too much. I'm by no means an expert on PvP at this point, but it's probably not an uncommon weapon given its reach and its power. For me, I went with the Flame Art Affinity because obviously we have so much invested in Faith, and then we use Lion's Claw. Yeah, definitely not bad at all as far as Guts Greatsword goes, but I think we know that. For PvE, it's great. For PvP, obviously, it's not too bad. It does have a ton of reach, which is a big advantage as far as the weapon itself goes. And then if you put it in Flame Art Affinity with 60 Faith, apparently you're going to get a lot of AR out of it because it's going to scale off of your Faith stat, and you'll get the fire damage too. Not a bad setup, able to take down some players in PvP using Lion's Claw and Flame Art Greatsword, solid combination. Now, for equipment for this one, we had the Flame Art Greatsword. Obviously, Flame Art Affinity gives us more damage because we have that Faith stat, that 60 Faith. Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. And then for stats, it's the same stats for the whole video. I was a Strength and Faith build, but these are solid stats if you want to run the Flame Art Greatsword. Guts Greatsword can be a really powerful combination with Lion's Claw. I hope that ended up being fun. I hope you guys had a good time with this PvP, jumping back into it. I hope it was something that, as far as, builds go, you guys can look forward to stuff like this too. And if you want to see more PvP content, if you want to see stuff that I do live or whatever, I may do some live streams eventually too. Let me know in the comments below how you feel about that. Definitely something I'm interested in doing. PvP ended up being a lot of fun for me. As usual, thanks for watching, everybody. Be sure to sub, check out all the builds on the channel, and I will catch you guys again soon.